Welcome to AI in 5. I'm your host, Simon Chris, and joining me today is Nathan Kinch. Nate is a socio-technology ethicist at Trustworthy by Design, and we're going to be chatting about doing ethics in AI. Hi Nate, welcome to AI in 5. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Simon. Good to be here.
Now, we're going to jump straight in because we've got a great topic and only 5 minutes to talk about it. In your role as an ethicist, which I think is a great title, by the way, I notice you're doing some fantastic workshops for companies and for people around doing ethics. What do you mean by doing ethics?
It's a good question, and it's something that often leads to a lot of confusion. Now, I don't have the one ring to rule them all, so I'll give you my take.
Okay.
Ethics is the process that we execute in a given situation to reflect on our first order moral beliefs in an attempt to align our decisions, actions, and the likely consequences to what we believe to be most good and right. So it's a really practical thing. We all do it all the time. And really what I'm trying to do is bring more theoretical rigor and grounding to these very practical organizational approaches to doing ethics.
And you just said organizational, which is a great word. It often kind of elicits in people, well, that's a job for the CEO and, the CFO and people like that. How are you finding ethics being democratized across the organization? How do we get everyone in the organization to understand the ethical focus, particularly around AI adoption?
It's a really challenging question, and I don't think there's one thing that we have to do that's going to get us there. I think there's sort of like a multiplicity of responses or a portfolio-like approach, but there are some kind of patterns that I think work really well. So I do something called participatory ethics, and participatory ethics starts with this basic but I think very powerful belief that says the best ethical decisions are most likely to be made when the people that are directly and indirectly impacted by those decisions are actively invited into the decision-making process itself. So what we do is we say, hey, we want this to start with the board. That's really important because that impacts corporate governance. It impacts the authorizing environment within which we all operate. But we don't want it to just be top-down. We want it to be top-down. We want it to be bottom-up. We want it to be middle, in and out. And we want to extend beyond the organizational boundaries. We want to invite advocacy groups. We want to invite customer representatives, maybe regulators. There's lots of different parties that can come into a kind of like a living process to explore what does good mean? How do we do more good?
That's going to be very different for different groups, right? Because if you've got someone who, say, as a provider to disabled people or highly vulnerable groups versus a company that makes paint, they're going to be very different things, right?
Totally. So context matters. And, there's one specific approach that we use called consequence scanning. And that basically encourages to go, all right, based on what we're thinking of doing, based on what we care about, based on what we might want the future to look like, what could happen? How do we increase the likelihood of good? And how do we decrease the likelihood of bad? And the more diversity in that process, the better grasp we're going to have on possibility and the more likely we are to maximize the good and minimize the bad.
So, Nate, for businesses that are just starting their AI journey, they're just standing at the door, it might be a really simple use case like taking meeting minutes or something. How do they start this ethical journey?
So I think there's two things. So first is probably go somewhere like the National AI Center and really familiarize yourself with those resources. There are many places you can go for great resources, and that's just one. The other thing that I would add is encouragement towards deeper, like values reflection, taking a good hard look in the mirror. What type of organization do we most want to be? And be honest with yourself. And I think the combination of these two orientations or these two activities is most likely to help you do real good out in the world. And a simple proxy, if you go home at the end of the day and you're having a conversation with your kids and you're describing what it was that you did and you feel like proud about that and you feel like, wow, I'm contributing to the type of world that I want them to live in, you are probably moving in the right direction.
What great advice. Simple, great advice. Nate, this has been a fantastic AI in 5. Before you go, though, I ask
Mm.
everybody really quickly, what is your one tip, your one trick, your one tip for someone who's just starting to play with AI? What's your best tip?
Okay, so I would say for those starting to play with AI, which I know could mean many different things, I would actually have a read of something like the Ethics Center's Principles for Good Tech, or go to the Markula Center for Applied Ethics out of Santa Clara University and have a look at their overview of ethics in tech practice. Both are brilliant resources, and both are probably going to encourage you to think about AI and other technologies in ways that you haven't thought about them before.
Wonderful. Awesome advice. Once again, Nate, thanks for being on AI in 5.
Thanks, Simon. See you, everyone.